6 other books from eSpec Books. Feet of Clay is the second book in my Adventures of Bram Gold, which is an urban fantasy series set in New York City about a guy from the Bronx who hunts monsters for a living. And this is story. This part of the story is where Bram, our main character, is having dinner with his aunt, Rabbi Esther Lieberman, and her husband Eli Lieberman. Eli is a retired chef, so having dinner at his place is always fun. And I think that's pretty much all you need to get into this. So Bram is still dealing with the ramifications of what happened at the end of the first book, A Furnace Sealed, which eSpec has just reissued, which you can also get through the Kickstarter. So here we go. I yanked open the glass door of the big red brick apartment building where the Liebermans lived, and stood in the vestibule for a few seconds, letting the central air conditioning wash over me. When I finally opened my eyes and wiped the evaporating sweat from my forehead, I saw the weekday evening shift doorman, Jamal, sitting behind the big fake wood desk. You couldn't get to either of the 2 elevators, any of the staircases, or the first-floor hallways without getting past that desk. Not that that was usually an issue for me, what with being a regular visitor and all, so I just nodded to Jamal and started to walk past him, and then stopped when he said, "Can I help you, sir?" Jamal had been working as a doorman in this building for about 7 years. This was only the 4th time he called me sir, and the first 3 times were right after he started and he couldn't remember my name. He also hadn't spoken that formally with me since those first few weeks. "I'm fine, Jamal. I'm just going to have dinner with Esther and Eli. That would be Rabbi and Mr. Lieberman in 5E. I looked around to see if there was a camera crew, or, anybody else, which there wasn't. "Jamal, what the hell's..." But Jamal was staring at the monitor on his desk. "I'm sorry, but there's nobody in the computer listed as visiting 5E this evening." "I didn't even know you were supposed to do that." Finally, Jamal's real personality peeked through as he smiled. "What do you think this computer was for?" I shrugged. "I figured you just used it to play solitaire during the slow shifts." The serious face came back. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm going to have to call the Liebermans. Can I have your name, please?" This was really starting to freak me out. First I'm reunited with the schmuck who got my parents killed, and now this. "Abe Goldblum. I'm their nephew, in case, you forgot since I was last here 2 days ago." More weirdness. Jamal didn't pick up the phone, but put it on speaker. He never did that when he called upstairs that I'd ever seen. He entered a sequence of numbers that I recognized as belonging to Esther and Eli. 2 rings, and then I heard Esther's voice over the tinny speaker. "Jamal? What's going on?" "Rabbi Lieberman, I have an Abe Goldblum who says he's here to see you." A pause, then, "Any particular reason why on his way up here he isn't?" "I'm sorry, Rabbi, but building policy is that all guests must be in the computer, and I don't see anyone listed there. You're supposed to..." "Are you kidding me with this?" "I'm sorry, ma'am.
Since when does my own nephew have to be vetted? He's here twice a week at least."
"Ma'am, policy of this building, as outlined to me by my supervisors, is that all guests must be..."
"I'm coming down there."
A click, and then a dial tone. Jamal hit the speaker button, which ended the call. The other shoe had dropped in my head, as it probably did in Esther's, which is why she was coming down. To prove the point, a door in the back corner of the lobby opened. I was fairly certain I'd never seen anyone actually use that door before. A short, bald guy in a wrinkled button-down shirt and slacks came stomping out. "What the hell was that?" "I did what you said, Mr. Horvat."
"I beg your pardon? When did I tell you to..."
"You said that if someone wasn't in the computer to call the apartment. I did that." Horvat waved his arms back and forth.
"And now she's coming downstairs. You're supposed to get confirmation that the guest is supposed to be here, that's all."
Jamal shrugged. "I can't help what she did, sir. I was just trying to get her permission, but she hung up on me and said she was coming down."
"I know. I heard."
Horvat threw up his hands and started pacing behind the desk.
"This is ridiculous. Things down here are worse than I thought."
I didn't like the sound of that. The elevator dinged and the door slid open to reveal the stout form of my aunt. 5'5", with a short, sharp shock of semi-curly, steel-gray hair, and wearing a white blouse and black jeans, Rabbi Esther Lieberman strode out of the elevator, pushing her black plastic-framed glasses up her prodigious nose. She and I both shared the family hooter. Our noses tended to enter the room 10 minutes before we did. As soon as she caught sight of the bald guy, she stopped short. stared at him, pushed her glasses back up her nose. They tended to start slipping down her schnoz within nanoseconds of her pushing them up, and said, "Tommy? Are you the putz who's keeping my nephew from dinner?" Horvat pointed at me. "This is your nephew?" I decided to join the conversation that was more or less about me anyhow, though I was starting to realize there was far more about the building. Putting out my hand, I said, "Hi, Abe Goldblum." After a second, he returned the handshake. "Tomislav Horvat. I'm the new president of the co-op board, and I've been hearing complaints about how lax things are at the front desk." Esther threw up her hands. "Lax? What, Tommy, you're worried people are going to get nuclear launch codes if Jamal doesn't do a background check?" "Please, Esther, you know it's not like that, but we have to have a record—" "No, Tommy, we don't." Esther shoved her glasses up her nose, then put her hands on her hips, at which point I knew that Horvat was toast. "For starters, unlike you, my husband and I have been part of this co-op since before computers were even really a thing." Horvat folded his arms over his chest. "Computers were invented before World War II. You know what I mean. The point is—" "Oh, is there a point?" Esther's glasses had fallen halfway down her nose, and she peered at him over the frames. "Yes, Tommy, there's a point. The point is, it's nobody's business who comes up to see me and Eli, except for me and Eli." "There are security concerns." "Yeah, there are." Esther shoved her glasses back up her nose. "You might recall that I'm a rabbi. People come to see me for reasons that are not only none of your business, but which are completely confidential and should absolutely not be recorded on someone's cloud storage. What's more, Dr. Goldblum here is my nephew. He comes by us for dinner twice a week, and more besides. He's family. Family doesn't get to be screened by the apartment-dwelling equivalent of the TSA." During this harangue, Horvat had slowly backed away from Esther, but she just kept moving closer to him. Jamal was also trying very hard not to giggle, and at one point developed a coughing fit. "Furthermore, we're in Riverdale, which is one of the safest neighborhoods in the city. We haven't had any kind of break-ins or anything like that in ages." "Says the woman whose own synagogue has been vandalized." Horvat pointed an accusatory finger at Esther. "You of all people should be right here with me, making sure that the doormen actually screen the people who enter the building." "From people they don't recognize? Absolutely. So then they call upstairs, like Jamal did for my nephew here, even though he's known him for ages. But I will not stand for the entire building getting to know who has visited my home every day. That's a violation of Eli's and my privacy. It's a violation of our guests' rights, and it's frankly a rotten thing to do. Now, if you'll excuse me," she said while grabbing my arm a little harder than was necessary, and then guiding me to the elevator, "I want to have dinner with my nephew here." The elevator was still there from Esther's trip down, so it opened as soon as she pushed the up button. I heard Horvat talking to Jamal as the doors closed on us after we entered. "Can you believe this nonsense?" Esther asked, shaking her head, then pushing her glasses back up. "He's been a pain in the tuchus ever since he became president of the board. He was secretary for years. We never heard a peep out of him. But now he's the president, and he's having delusions of grandeur." We arrived at the 5th floor. As we walked out into the hall, I said, "Well, he's got a point about security, especially with the synagogue being vandalized and all." That was my subtle way of pointing out to Esther that I had to hear about what happened at the synagogue from a source other than my aunt, who was its rabbi. But instead of apologizing for this uncharacteristic oversight of information providing on her part, she said, "Maybe, but putting poor Jamal through that idiocy, he didn't need to." I might have had a reply to that, but as we approached 5E, the smells of roasted chicken wafted to my nostrils, and I lost all power of speech. Esther opened the door, which, in a weird quirk of New York City apartment design, led to the dining room. This was an improvement over my own place, where the front door faced the bathroom door. On the far end of the dining room from the front door was the kitchen, where I saw Eli chopping vegetables for a salad. The heavenly smells of roasted poultry emanated from the oven right to my eager nostrils and quivering taste buds. Without even looking up from his chopping, Eli asked, "You find out why Jamal was being weird, or was I right and it was Tommy being a putz?" "It was Tommy being a putz," Esther said. "As soon as I heard Jamal was on speaker, I knew he was playing to someone, and Bram, it wasn't. How you doing, Bram?" "Much better now that I'm inhaling your chicken." "It's even better when you eat it." "That's what I've heard. How soon till it's done and I can prove you're right?" Now Eli looked up, sniffed, and said, 4 minutes. Unlike Esther and me, Eli had an ordinary-sized proboscis, but what his nose lacked in size, it made up for in accuracy. And that was with his thick white mustache in the way, though it went nicely with his even thicker white beard, which came down to his sternum. He'd had to stay clean-shaven during his years as a chef for hygiene reasons, but the moment he retired, he stopped shaving. Competing with the olfactory wonderfulness of the kitchen was the plate full of pickled herring on the table, along with horseradish and some bread that I knew came from Little Italy here in the Bronx. Hell, the chicken probably came from one of the butchers there, too. Sure, there were plenty of good Jewish grocery stores in Riverdale, but Eli did a great deal of shopping in Little Italy as well. "The Italians," he'd said once, "they know from food a little." I sat down at the small round table. When they had more company than just a single nephew, they put a leaf or two in it and became a bigger oval-shaped table that just barely fit in the space. New York apartments don't generally do big dining rooms, even when they have them. Popping some herring into my mouth, I chewed, swallowed, then said, "So I bet you're wondering how I knew about what was happening at the synagogue since I didn't find out from the rabbi. I was hired to look into it. By Josh Roth, of all people." Esther sat down next to me. "Yeah, I know that, Bram. Who do you think told Josh to hire you?" I nearly choked on my second piece of herring. I coughed for a moment, held up a hand to stave off Esther slapping me on the back, accepted the glass of water she poured for me from the crystal pitcher that was next to the herring, and then finally said, "What the hell are you doing talking to Josh Roth?" Now it was my turn to have Esther peer at me from over her glasses, and I flinched. 30 years of being her nephew, you'd think I'd have developed an immunity to that glare, but no. Every time she looked at me over her glasses, I was a 6-year-old kid who just ate the last Hamantaschen without asking first. "Remember what I said to Tommy downstairs about how people come to see me because I'm their rabbi?" I blinked. "You're still Roth's rabbi?" "Yep." "Why?" "Because none of your business." Self-righteous anger was eating away at the scared 6-year-old. "I think it's a little bit my business that you're giving aid and comfort to the piece of crap who got your brother and sister-in-law killed." "I'm not. I'm giving aid and comfort to a scared kid who was devastated by a stupid thing he did that got 3 people killed, for which he's been trying to make up for the last 12 years. I reached for the glass of water, then put it right back down when I realized my hand was shaking. So you told him to hire me?" "He saw the golem first, and we figure it's all connected." "You think maybe he saw the golem because he's the one who brought it back?" Eli walked in from the kitchen, carrying a bowl filled with lettuce and veggies of various shapes, sizes, and colors, and covered in what smelled like his balsamic vinaigrette. "Didn't Miriam's father cast that spell on him?" "Ampuero," I said, "and he didn't cast it. He hired a magic user to cast it. Wardines didn't manipulate magic, they just supervised it. Thing is, the spell doesn't always work 100%. When Miriam was questioning Rebecca before she, Eli and Esther both nodded. They were fully aware of what really happened with my cousin. One of the options she gave me was casting Ampuero. Problem is, it isn't 100%, so someone has to keep an eye on her regularly, and that had to be me, and I wasn't sure I drifted off as a few synapses belatedly fired in my brain. "It's you," I said to Esther. "You're the one keeping an eye on Roth." We're back at the none of your business stage, but yes, I thought it was the least I could do for Morty and Ray. Tears welled up in my eyes. Eli went back into the kitchen and opened the oven. Now the roasted chicken smell was everywhere, and it was glorious. "So you're making sure he stays away from golems?" I asked. "Among other things. When he saw the golem, he was a little verklempt, I can tell you that." I frowned. "Wait, you said he was the first to see the golem?" Carving the chicken on the kitchen counter, Eli asked, "Just so I know, Bram, you going to be 5 minutes behind the conversation the whole night?" Unable to help myself, I chuckled. "I'll try to catch up faster, Uncle Eli." "Good. It makes my wife cranky when you're stupid." Esther rolled her eyes. "Don't listen to my husband. You make me cranky even when you're not stupid." "Thanks, Aunt Esther." "Don't get me wrong," she added, pushing her glasses up her nose. "You're being incredibly stupid right now. Yes, Joshua wasn't the only one to see the golem. Once it was corroborated by other people, I told him to call you. We needed a courser to deal with this, and I thought it would be good for Joshua and for you if you handled it." Whatever anger I'd had melted away, and I slumped in my chair while stabbing at another piece of herring. "Well, I guess I should ask about the break-ins then." "Not tonight. Tonight you're a mess. And aren't you at the hospital after this?" "Yeah. I don't usually do 2 overnight shifts in a row, but one of the other MDs had called in sick yesterday, which is why I worked last night. Tonight would be my normally scheduled overnight, which was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. "So fine. After you play doctor, get some sleep, and then come by the synagogue tomorrow around lunch?" Remembering Bart Jackson, I asked, "Can we make it later in the afternoon? I got another client I got to see first thing after I get up." Esther's eyes widened. "Which client?" "New one. Two new clients in one day. I'm impressed." "Yeah," Eli said. "Keep this up and people will think you do this for a living or something." I swallowed my snotty retort to that when Eli came in with a serving plate covered in chicken parts, steam rising from the roasted bird. Now I could smell the spices, which Eli had rubbed under the skin along with grapeseed oil. It would normally be olive oil, but Esther was allergic to olives. My nose wasn't as refined as Eli's, but I picked out enough to know that this was Eli's Simon and Garfunkel chicken. He rubbed sage, rosemary, and thyme under the skin with the oil and garnished the chicken in the oven with parsley. He'd also used carrots and celery as a support for the chicken in the pan instead of a rack, which meant there were roasted veggies infused with eau de chicken to go with the other food. Magnificent. The conversation shifted after that, first to Eli enumerating every spice he put in the chicken. I called it. It was the Simon and Garfunkel version, plus kosher salt, of course. And then Eli confirmed another assumption, that he got the chicken at the butcher in Little Italy. I got a beef tongue while I was there, too, he was saying. And Sal told me about the time he went to Italy and got to see St. Anthony's tongue. Esther made a face, and her glasses slid down her nose. They saved St. Anthony's tongue? Nodding, Eli said, and put it on display in a church in Padua. Shaking her head and pushing her glasses up, Esther said, I do not understand Catholics. Sal said it looked like a burnt piece of wood. Eli then looked at me. Didn't you guys go to Italy for one of your August trips? I smiled with a tinge of nostalgia at that. Before my parents died, we used to go somewhere every August. They'd close the practice for a month and we'd travel. We went to Spain, Japan, Australia, Germany, Greece, and closer to home, Vancouver, San Francisco, Chicago, and Atlanta. And also Italy. Yeah, we wandered all over Tuscany and Forlì in a rental car. That was fun, especially with Dad insisting he could drive a stick shift and then proceeding to prove himself incredibly wrong and almost destroying the car's transmission. So Ray drove the whole time? Esther asked. Oh yeah. And we're heading up toward Ravenna from Florence, and the GPS is saying it'll take 2 hours to go a distance that should only take half an hour at best. But there's no traffic, just a road with some squiggles here and there. Turns out one of those squiggles was a mountain, which we didn't realize until we'd been driving up in a circle for 10 minutes on a skinny road with no guardrail. Mom and Dad were both convinced we were going to die, while 12-year-old me thought it was the coolest thing ever. Eli chuckled. Sounds about right. The view from the top of the mountain was absolutely breathtaking, though. We stopped at a rest area there so Mom and Dad could get their hearts restarted. It was late afternoon, so the sun was starting to set, and the sky was about 18 different colors at once, like an impressionist painting on top of this beautiful countryside of green hills broken up by the occasional village. I shook my head. Damn, I miss those trips. You should take a vacation, Esther said. You haven't taken one since before you went off to Harvard, have you? I shook my head. I'm pretty sure my passport expired, and I just haven't really felt the need to travel. Need, it's not about, Esther said, peering at me from over her glasses again. You're a big honking mess. Once you take care of this golem and that other client you mentioned, you're taking a vacation. I thought the idea was stupid, but wasn't suicidal enough to say so. Instead, I mentioned the time we were in Greece, and Dad insisted on going up Santorini steps on mules, which led to Eli and Esther talking about their honeymoon in Mexico and various other travel stories that got my mind, at least temporarily, off Rebecca and Josh Roth. By the time I needed to head out so I could start my ER shift on time, I had consumed a ton of chicken, a half ton of salad, and a mess of rice that I had no memory of Eli actually putting on the table. It was just kind of there. Armed with 3 Tupperwares full of leftovers, I headed out around 9, which was barely enough time to walk home, put away the food, feed and scritch Mittens, and drive over to Montefiore Hospital. Luckily, work was busy, so I didn't really have time to focus on how crazy it was that Esther had been helping Roth all this time without ever telling me. And I still wasn't entirely convinced that Roth hadn't beaten Empuero and recreated the golem himself. That is from Feet of Clay, which can be supported on Kickstarter. Go to Kickstarter.com and look up Something for Everyone, and you will find the crowdfund, which includes not only Feet of Clay, but also Eros e Eros by F. Deal. I probably pronounced that badly. My French is rusty. That's a steampunk novel taking place in Paris. Christine Norris's A Curse of Time and Vengeance, which is a steampunk retelling of the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty. Ty Drago's Checkmate, which is the first in a new series about a superhero called Checkmate. As well as short story collections by Christopher L. Bennett, which is called Aliera's Descent and Other Stories. Christopher J. Burke, which is called A Bucket Full of Moonlight. And Lisanne Norman, with a collection called The Pharaoh's Cat. All of those can be supported on the starter that kicks, as well as all sorts of other cool bonuses. We've already blown past not just the funding goal, but also the hitting a lot of the stretch goals. So there's lots of bonuses that you get automatically just by supporting at $7 or over, including 3 other Bram other Bram Universe short stories. Under the King's Bridge, Matrafamilias, and Unguarded. Those are all 3 stories that take place in the same milieu, and you'll get those if you pledge for $7 or more. You'll get those 3 for free, among many other things. Please check it out, and keep reading. Thank you.